My For You page has been covered in Iron Flame theories. Rebecca, I think they're on to you. So many of these theories sound plausible. That being said, I want to discuss them. So if you have not read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame all the way to the end, please go enjoy the books and come back when you're done. Let's get into theory number 1, and that is that Dain is venin.
Wyvern in the last battle are described as having rotten teeth. These are the only winged creatures that have these descriptions about their breath. A few different versions of what this could mean. One, when a rider turns venin, the bond with their dragon starts to decay. You might be thinking, what about Dain? More on that in a second. The second option is when a rider turns venin, something happens internally with their dragon. She also mentioned when a rider has association with these dark wielders, so not necessarily that they are venin themselves, but they're doing something with the dark wielders. That could also affect their dragon and thus their breath. But what would this mean for Dain? Because I really don't think Dain is a venin. I do not see that happening in the slightest. However, even Lucy mentions the fact that Xaden reads Dain's intentions and Homeboy was absolutely 100% game to move over to the Revolution.
There's a very clear note in Iron Flame that Dain's dragon, Cat, has just really horrible breath. That's something that we know is the trait of a wyvern potentially. And it honestly just feels like symbolic of how their bond with their rider is almost soured, like because the power is coming from the earth to the person to the animal. It's like in the almost opposite direction that it should be going. I believe the only other dragon we get this sort of account from is Varish's dragon, who, after realizing at the end of the book that there could be venin just walking among us, I was immediately like, Varish has to be venin. His dragon, Solus, almost seems like he's under the control of Varish as opposed to sort of the other way around. And it seems like venin can still maintain their bond with their dragon after they turn venin, but it seems like that bond is sort of decaying. So if Dain is a venin, then that would make sense as to why Cass has this sort of wyvern breath. Of course, that sort of brings up the question that since Xaden can read people's intentions, he would have surely known if Dain was up to something bad, but there was this argument that Xaden might be reading Dain's intentions, and Dain's intentions might be good in his mind. If Dain feels like he's doing the right thing, then that's all that Xaden sees. So I think that's something to note with his power, is that it's not infallible. If somebody believes the wrong thing, then their good intentions might actually be hurtful to the rebellion. But while I was down this rabbit hole of this sort of decaying bond between the dragon and their rider, it seems like that might be what is going to happen with Xaden and Sigale. I don't see Sigale just leaving him and breaking their bond, but I think that also means since venin seem to be able to control their dragon, if Xaden can't keep a hold of his veninness, then he has Sigale, this massive, super powerful dragon, under his control. If we're going to be headed towards a battle where it is Xaden the venin against Violet, that would mean Tairn and Sigale fighting against one another. I have more thoughts on that later. Theory number 2 is something that I really think is true, and it's that Neolan, Tairn's old rider, is actually still alive and is venin.
Brennan specifically says Naolin didn't fail, but it cost him everything. Doesn't specifically say it cost him his life, but his soul, to me, would mean more than costing someone's life. That would be costing everything. Just maybe, Naolin is the sage, or is connected in like some of the top hierarchy of the venin, because Naolin was bonded to Taran, so maybe that's how Violet and Xaden are having these dreams.
The story behind Neolan's death and Brennan's death is that Brennan was dying and Neolan was trying to heal him, but it was at a point that to heal Brennan he was going to have to burn himself out, and it still wouldn't be enough because Brennan was that close to death. So if we're following like a regular story, then sure, we're seeing a writer who accidentally went too far trying to save this other guy, and now they're both dead. But Brennan is alive, which means Neolan would have had to take all of his power past burnout and then some to save Brennan, which would probably mean pulling power directly from the earth and giving it to Brennan, turning himself into a venin in the process. And I've seen several people backing this theory up because I think as far as we know, we never get the words Neolan is dead from people like Brennan who know what actually happened and who were there. Brennan says that for Naolin to save him, it cost him everything. And of course, at the time of reading this, we just kind of automatically think with that language that it cost him his life. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it cost him his soul, his bond with his dragon, potentially his relationship. It really seems like Naolin and Brennan were together, because why else would you make the same sacrifice that Xaden made if not to save the person you're in love with? Now, I completely believe that this theory is true, but in the same video, the creator brought up a different point that I am not sold on yet, and that is that Naolin was the 7th rider. The theory here is that Naolin was the 7th rider, and he was riding a dragon that was the 7th type of dragon, which is the chameleon dragon that Andarna is. If this is the case, then maybe he's been a venin for so long that, you know, he's the sage. He's the head honcho venin. I'm not completely sold on this because as far as we know, Violet is the only human to have ever bonded 2 dragons. And if this theory about Neolan is right, then Neolan would have had to have bonded 2 dragons, the chameleon dragon and then later on Tairn. And I can't remember the timeline for Tairn's bond with Neolan, but it just doesn't seem plausible that we have all this stuff that happened 600 years ago and Neolan was a bonded rider, and then he was also a bonded rider with Tairn, and now Tairn's old enough that maybe there was a double bond or something, but I feel like that would have come up at this point. And Neolan would have to have been venin for a really long time to have been in a relationship with Brennan. So to me, the timeline just doesn't match up unless Brennan fell in love with Naolin, who was already venin. And maybe venin can live forever because they can pull power from the earth, like Mother Gothel in Tangled, But there was a really interesting comment on this video that if Naolin is a venin, and if he is in fact the sage, that maybe the reason he can talk to Violet in her dreams is because there's still a bit of a bond between him and Tairn, and now Violet is obviously bonded to Tairn. The only plot hole here is that Tairn doesn't put up with crap, and so I feel like he would have told Violet if he'd had a rider before that had bonded 2 dragons, and if Naolin was alive. And I know there were a couple people saying, like, Tairn is very adamant that we don't talk about Naolin. Seems to indicate even a stronger heartbreak than death. So I could see there potentially being something like that, but I just don't know if Tairn would choose to hide that from Violet. Up next is another theory that I really think holds water, and it's that Mera is a venin. Most of these are about who's venin. Maybe she's not venin yet, but she's on the wrong side. I have felt this way for a long time. Early in the book, when we go to visit Mera and Violet is just spilling all her secrets, I was like, why are we doing this? We haven't talked to Mera in like 3 years. This girl is a different person than the sister that Violet grew up with. I've always felt uneasy around her. I don't know why I don't trust her. I just don't. It's a gut feeling. Now, I was talking to a friend this week who was like, Brennan was not accounted for in the final battle. I don't remember reading anyone's name because I was so focused on Violet. But in this specific TikTok video, they say that Mera wasn't accounted for in the final battle, as if maybe she didn't actually fight in it and she was off elsewhere. But like, I get better vibes from Brennan. And like, he knows Xaden really well, whereas Mera, not a fan of Xaden, you know? The next theory is that Andarna is the key to defeating the venin. And by defeating, that would mean either actually killing them, but defeating the venin could also mean bringing them back onto the right side of power and bringing them almost back to life. At least in my mind, venin are very zombie-ish. We even get a quote that the last time the venin were defeated, it was 600 years ago, and that they've been actively searching for the weapon that defeated the venin since then. Andarna has waited 650 years to hatch. But if Andarna had not hatched yet, that means that she either wasn't the weapon and maybe it was a different chameleon dragon, or she's been reincarnated, which I think would be a very interesting route to go with this, but I just don't know if that type of magic really fits in with the rest of the lore. Like, I feel like it would have been brought up by now. We're at the end of book 2. So if that type of magic, reincarnation of dragons, was a thing, I feel like it would have been hinted at already. But if she is, then she has some type of bringing back to life, resurrection type power. Because like, she needed to have prior knowledge. If she was waiting for Violet to hatch. It's not like she was just waiting for someone she got good vibes from. She was specifically waiting for someone who she thought she could pair up with to win this war. So she had to have had the knowledge. So maybe she is reincarnated. I don't. But also, how do you wait to hatch? How do you wait to be born? Like, what is this? So if we continue along this line, and Andarna really does have some sort of resurrection power, like power over death, and she can control when she was born, so power over life, that's probably gonna take a lot of energy, which is Violet's signet, and we've just seen it in lightning so far.
The Venon are after Violet because she is a lightning wielder. There's so many reasons why. They talk about how rare lightning wielders are. There hasn't been one in centuries. They talk about how they have the power to split the sky open. In the section above the chapters, there's a section that says the only thing that will defeat a Venon is like pure power. And when she's training her powers in Iron Flame, they talk about how it's not lightning, it's like pure energy. And then also anytime she sees a Venon, the Venon is like, oh, it's you. He's looking for you.
So maybe Andarna waited for Violet because she needed the right human that she could siphon that much power and energy through. You know, the type of power and energy we're probably going to need to undo someone being a Venon. How do we get the power from Andarna into a human who is Violet and transform it into the mending type of power you would need to heal a soul? Brennan. I feel like he's our glue here. After seeing these videos, I really do think that Brennan has to be on our side because he's the only mender that we know that we can also rely on. We saw a mender try to heal someone's soul. So they tried to heal Jack Barlow of being a Venon and it didn't work. So if we are able to put Brennan in with the extra energy, then maybe this is how we heal Venon. So that would mean that we need Violet and Brennan working together. Does that mean that we can heal Neolan so that Brennan can have his happy ending? The creator who brought this up also had a second theory that what's going to bring us to the final battle before we can heal Xaden with this Xaden and Sigale versus Violet and Tairn situation is that Xaden's gonna have to do something unforgivable. And now this would make a little more sense if Xaden has kind of fallen to the dark side, and if he had done something so bad that Violet was ready to kill him, that would give us a stronger battle scene than if she was just trying to deflect his killing blows. So what could possibly get Violet angry enough to want to kill Xaden? If Mera's on the bad side and we really need Brennan to make the whole story work, we are left with Rhiannon. I think it makes sense. I don't want it to make sense, but I think it does. In the final part of that video, she says that even with all of the energy coming from Violet, Brennan is going to end up dying trying to save Xaden. So in that case, that would mean we probably kill Naolin, potentially, who is also the sage, and Brennan dies, but he does so by giving Violet the chance at a relationship and love that he didn't get, alongside other deaths that are going to hurt. She also says that during this battle, there's a possibility that Sigale dies. At this point, her bond with Venon Xaden could be completely severed or so corrupted by him being Venon that her death doesn't kill Xaden, but it would kill Tairn. Theoretically, since Violet has Andarna, another dragon bond, if this one's cut with Tairn, she might be okay too. I am rejecting this theory. No, please don't do this to me. Tairn is like one of my favorite characters of this book, and just like a general top favorite character, he is the Magnus Bane, the angrier version of Dumbledore, the Haymitch. Like, that's the character that he is, and I just don't want to see him or Sigale die. Next theory is that Violet's second signet is being able to work with the dead somehow. When I saw this theory immediately after reading Iron Flame, it made so much sense to me because she is having these dreams with the venin in them. And the venin, again, I think of as the Walking Dead. So, like, how is she communicating with them without some sort of power intervening? And then also, when she was being tortured and she was hallucinating Liam and he was talking to her so specifically, I was like, is she making this up, or is Liam's ghost actually there with her right now? And apparently Rebecca Yarros confirmed in like an interview that it was a hallucination, but it could have been a hallucination of real Liam and she was channeling him, that, I mean, potentially, like. And she also said that we saw Violet's second signet in Iron Flame. So that would make sense if she's able to somehow talk with the dead. But there is a theory that I like better.
However, the other thing that could affect Violet's signet, and that's to do with Andarna. The scale shifting. We know that Andarna's scales appear in a lot of different colors to Violet, mostly black because she wants to be like Tairn. But we know that she can kind of camouflage herself. She like became the boulder of the mountain. We kind of came to the conclusion that perhaps because Andarna is a chameleon and becomes whatever she needs, Violet's second signet will take on the same kind of pattern. Yes, the signet is dependent on the rider, so whatever the signet becomes is dependent on Violet, but perhaps that signet can change depending on what Violet is manifesting at that point for what she needs, because the magic is coming from Andarna, who is just a very special dragon, lots to talk about there, but chameleon.
If Violet is channeling pure power from Tairn, then maybe she is some sort of siphon as a power from Andarna. If we've seen Violet's second signet already and we haven't noticed, it's because it's not all the way clear what it is, which would make sense because Andarna is a chameleon. She's a shifter. If that type of shiftingness is coming from her power into Violet as a signet, maybe she can just scroll through her powers and be like, I need this one right now, and then use it the way Andarna can just change colors. Like, that would be something that we've never heard of before. But that could also mean that maybe she can tap into being intrinsic, which would be very interesting. Or can she just blend with the other powers around her, like how, you know, Andarna sort of adapts to her surroundings, so maybe she's only able to use the powers of the people around her, which would also make sense for her being a siphon. So I'm not really sure, but I hope my first one's correct, because I would love to see her be able to read people's minds. Last theory is that one of Violet's parents is Venon.
We have tried every method we know of as you requested. There's no cure, there's only control. And that's from Colonel Neolan to General Lilith Sorrengail. Why is Lilith Sorrengail trying to find cures for Venon, okay? Trying to find a cure because somebody she loves turned Venon. I don't know, is that her husband? I don't know, is her daughter a Venon and we just don't know? We also know that while she was pregnant with Violet, she nearly died from a fever. And if she nearly died, we can probably deduce that, like, the healers, the menders, nobody could save her. Like, whatever she had, nobody could save her from. So she was going to die. So perhaps in order to save herself and thus her unborn child, and then save her children from being motherless, her older children, what if she turned Venon to save Violet and herself and her kids? Oh my god, I'm sweating.
A lot of people noted that there was one of those little pre-chapter snippets of a letter to Violet's mother saying that they've tried everything, there's no cure to being a Venon. So this could go two ways. Because if Violet's dad was a Venon, like, Lilith has made it very clear that she loved Violet's dad. And so if he had turned Venon, I could see her not being capable of killing him or allowing other people to know about him being a Venon because she thinks that she can save him before he sort of loses it. Because it seems like being a Venon, you can control it, but over time, it's just gonna take you over. And we know that in Violet's perspective, the reason he sort of lost it at the end of his life was because he believed Brennan was dead. But maybe that's not the case. Like, of course he would be upset about Brennan being dead, but maybe his sort of extreme reaction was partly because he was Venon. And if that was the case, I could totally see it that eventually Lilith would have had to kill him to protect their kids. I'm not exactly sure, like, how dangerous a Venon gets, just like in normal everyday life, not with a wyvern and stuff like that. Like, if she saw that he was about to go off the edge, like, did she just poison him and stop his heart? I mean, her kids are poison masters, why not her too, you know? I think that would be really interesting to read about, because I think that would really change how Violet views her mother, because she always thought of her as this cold person and she really related more to her dad. But if we get some sort of journal entry or something when she goes to collect her mom's belongings and burn them, even though a lot of people don't burn all the stuff and they keep it, maybe there's some sort of hint in there about what actually went down in that situation. Or if Violet's mom herself is a Venon, it would make sense because Lilith almost died giving birth to Violet. So maybe to save herself and to save her child, she ended up pulling power directly from the earth to live. And ever since then, she's been struggling to sort of control her own venin nature, which would make sense to me because one of my biggest problems with Iron Flame was that it seemed like a really sudden personality switch on Lilith's part to be so loving and just open about her feelings with her kids, when at the beginning of Fourth Wing, Violet doesn't even call her mom her mom. She refers to her as the general because she feels that far removed and she doesn't feel any of that warmth from her mom. She specifically describes her as a cold person. But if the whole time her mom was fighting these horrible nature brewing inside her, yeah, that could turn someone pretty cold, especially if they're trying to, you know, shut out certain emotions and stuff. Because by the end, we know that her mom told her dad that the reason that I'll die isn't like because she'll fall in battle. She specifically says, I'll die protecting our kids or for our children, which is what she ended up doing. But then the only thing that doesn't make sense there is that if Lilith is already channeling all this power from the earth, why did she need Salone's help? Like, if she was already channeling all this power from the earth, then she wouldn't have burnt out at the end of Iron Flame. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, or if you can still burn out as a venin. But I don't see how she was able to pull power from the ground without Violet noticing that. So I don't know. I don't know where I land on that, but I really do think that one of her parents was venin, because why else was Lilith Sorrengail looking for a cure? So this last video I want to share with you is not a theory, but needs to be shared. Apparently we do have a release date for Fourth Wing 3, but Rebecca Yarros can't tell us yet. So as of right now, no official release date, which I think is good. I think we learned with this go around that it doesn't work to rush writing and printing a book. So I'm going to try my best to be patient for that one. And in the meantime, go off the deep end into all these different theories. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye.